Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and it's been 5,868 days since we last sat atop the AFL ladder. The inspirational Neil Danaher was our coach. David Neitz was our captain. Russell Robertson was our leading goal kicker that year. Nathan Jones had yet to be drafted to the club, and current-day Demon rookies Luke Jackson and Kozzy Pickett were just 3 years old. Joining us tonight, returning to the Demonland podcast, George. Good evening, George. How are you?
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, Binman. Good evening, everybody. I feel very privileged to be back here tonight. Based on my footy tipping this week, I've obviously got no idea about football, but here we are again.
I've been absolutely terrible at footy tipping this year. I can't get the D's right. I got them right this week, but nearly didn't. But I'm not one of those guys who always necessarily picks the Ds if I think we're not going to win. I won't pick them. But across the board, I've got no idea this year. It's very hard. Also joining us tonight, Big Man. Good evening, Big Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. Good evening, Demonlanders. And my tipping's actually mirroring the Demons' performance. I'm on top of my tipping comps, so I'm flying just parallels. I've picked Melbourne in every week, I think, except I didn't pick us against Richmond. So, it's doing well in both camps, tipping and the Ds.
We've automatically got 7 tips right there that I probably have missed out on 5 tips because I didn't back us, but that's on me. I'll just preface our show tonight just to let people know that I've been driving for 9 hours today. So if I sound a bit out of it, that's why. Guys, let's get started here. I thought it was such a Melbourne effort to come out looking so flat when before the game we were gifted the opportunity to win and then take top spot, being a match clear. And we also had some other results go our way that created a little bit of a buffer from some of the other contenders. And when we came out flat, that was the most, for me, my MFC SS was raging. And, I was not happy. Big Man, you're the glass half full man. I said it last week. I'm sure you were very calm and collected. Was that the case?
On the whole, I mean, I wasn't shocked that we came out flat. For me, I think that it's a mark of where we came, where we're at, and it's a sort of reflecting back on our conversation last week about what's changed and where are we. I thought, we would have lost that game 2 years ago, and we did, didn't we? They showed on the Fox coverage our recent 4 or 5 games down there, and like each of them more horrible than the next. We didn't have a good history down there, and you're going to have an off period. I thought at half time, that we were definitely going to kick into gear, so I wasn't particularly concerned. I was getting more concerned in that last quarter, though, because we were seemingly in control of the game all through that third quarter, but remarkably with 9 minutes, 37 seconds to go on the clock, it was 6 points down when we had that free kick not paid against May, which I thought was a pretty clear in the back, to be honest, and we whisked it up the other end of the ground, and I think ended up Fritsch kicking his 6th goal. To basically the game was over at that point, but 9 minutes to go and they're still in it. And when they got that third goal late, to sort of, that takes time to get back into the game, doesn't it? And I was a bit frustrated with a couple of the efforts, but I wasn't concerned that we would lose it still. And I thought it was a pretty, we'll talk about it through the show, but actually, enjoyed the win, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I did too. I think it was more relief for me that I enjoyed it. I just, wanted to bank that 4 points. But George, it was a tale of two halves. Like the last week against the Tigers, it was that first 15 minutes. This week for the first half, I was absolutely shitting myself. But this time it lasted until we had wrestled back control in the third quarter. Were you, George? Were you worried? Where was your head at? Did you think we'd be able to right the ship and get back in the contest, or
I think we've learnt that at any point in the game there will be changes in momentum. One team will be up and the other team will be down. But I think what really affected us in this game was actually the structures we talked about in the last couple of weeks, and it's been obvious from the coaching interviews that structures and role playing has become very, very important for the side and the success of the side. And I think what happened early on in this game, there was a number of things. Firstly, Viney going out, and the replacements weren't necessarily like for like. The early injury to Tomlinson again. Who did we have to swing into his position to play the role? And I think what happened was because that happened so early, those things happened so early in the game, and there were consequential actions throughout the whole field. And I'll use the example of Baker coming in to the side. Well, he's basically had only played as a winger. That meant we had to push Brayshaw somewhere else. So again, you can see the structures being moved around the ground, and I think it took us a half to actually get those structures in place again during the game. But when you've got a team that's running hard and hopeful and trying to get ahead, and they got the momentum with them like North Melbourne had, then obviously you're going to be behind on the scoreboard. We got our structures in place. It became obvious, certainly in that third quarter. The coach said at halftime that we were losing all over the ground. We had to get things right, and they did. And I was really impressed with a number of the changes they did make at halftime in particular, and probably just before halftime, that got the ship back righted. And as soon as the ship was righted, it was game over from there. Although coming back from 3 goals down, even though you kicked 5 goals, I think it was in the third quarter, you only just got your nose in front. And it's not surprising that North were within striking distance in the last quarter. But I think we need to get those structures right, particularly against sides like North, and we'll see it again this week with Sydney, teams that play the old rope-a-dope, chip the ball around type of game. You've got to have your structures right to defend against that style of play.
And just I totally agree with all of those points. And I also think Tomlinson going out definitely sort of disrupted their back six, and we didn't respond sort of as well as we did in terms of that structure as when May went out against Geelong. And I think that sort of points to how important that lockdown role at almost true fullback that Tomlinson's been playing is, in terms of allowing May and Lever to play the way they do, and in particular Lever zoning off and being such a sort of key intercept player. That was definitely a big factor, and I totally agree. And I thought Baker didn't have a good first half, and I was sort of frustrated with a few of his disposals, but more his decisions. He went for goal at one point where he had, I think, T-Mac in the forward pocket, and he just made some sort of crucial errors of decision-making in that first half. And, I can understand maybe it's sort of he gets his chance and maybe he's thinking this is my chance to cement the spot. But, I thought it was a strange selection. And, George, I don't know, I didn't pick it up where they ended up playing Gus. Did he play in the middle?
He moved into the middle. This is the unfortunate thing of watching it on television, but he definitely moved into the middle for a guy who hasn't played in the middle effectively all this season.
Yeah.
This is all about the role playing. You play a different style on the wing to what you do in the middle, as Gus has proven.
Well, and I was a bit, because I said on Dreamland before that I didn't think they'd do that. I'd be really surprised for that exact reason, is that he's bedded down a position that's taken him a bit of time to get used to and to make it his, and not an easy position either, because you're often out of the play and you're asked to be, sort of deep defensive at one stage, and then, on a wing where the ball doesn't come down at it the next. Maybe they wanted to give Baker a good chance to show that he could be a wingman, but he didn't take his chance. He had a better second half, to be fair to him. The other thing I think with Tomlinson going out, he was super distraught, and I think it rattled the team, to be honest, because he was on the bench and they made comment about it. He was in tears. He came to the quarter-time huddle still clearly emotionally as you'd expect. I mean, it was just horrible thinking. An ACL, all the players know it. It's 12 months out of the game pretty much, isn't it? Well, certainly the rest of this season out. So, he was shattered. I think his defenders, they're obviously a strong unit back there. Hibberd looked shattered. May look shattered. So, I think they took a little time to recover from that, because that was, I think, only at the 5-minute mark.
Yeah.
But the key thing for me, you're right on the structure. I think that's the key thing is pressure. And 2 games, our game and the Richmond Dogs game, to me really highlighted how critical pressure is in footy. And it's the one variable that, you're in control of to an extent. You can't do much about your lack of talent apart from drafting players in and building and developing a team over a number of years as we have. You can control how much pressure you apply. They applied more pressure in the first half and we were way off our game. You could tell that was what you were saying, Andy. We weren't sort of in the game right from the beginning, and that's going to happen. It's hard to stay up at this level. Back in the 80s and 90s, the teams that were winning 6, 7, 8, 9 in a row, they could go through a game with half rat power and still crush Melbourne by 60 points. That just doesn't happen in footy these days. And I thought North's pressure was heaps better than ours, and that was the biggest factor. And as soon as we started ramping it up, it's like you said a couple of weeks ago, George, as soon as that, we got the sledgehammer cracking the nut, then, they were going to crack eventually. But we were just not up to where we want to be with our pressure level, and all credit to them. They were, and Cunnington was going crazy with his pressure and possessions, and that was a great sort of example of pressure, as the Dogs game was. As soon as, and we might talk about it a bit later, but as soon as Richmond upped the pressure, Andy, in the second half, that really was a sort of telling example of how powerful that level of pressure on the ball carrier is. And in terms of the structure, I think that it can't be undersold either how important the pressure on the ball carrier is to our game plan, because if you don't pressure the ball carrier, like the 2 goals they got early in that first quarter, there was no pressure on the player kicking it inside 50, and they got clean looks straight inside 50, no problems. And so, bit of pressure on the ball carrier, and then that suddenly becomes an intercept mark to lever. It's just, we're not going to win games of footy without bringing that pressure every week, but that's going to be a challenge for the full season. That's the sort of, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Their game was sort of reminiscent of ours sort of a decade ago, or, the Neil sort of era, or just before then, where we would sort of maybe be good for a half a game and then just get absolutely rolled. I saw a lot of comments on Demonland, and more so on social media, lamenting our performance, particularly in the first half against the bottom team, who on more than one occasion this year have been smashed from pillar to post. Many were critical, some even claiming that we didn't deserve to win the match, and I've got to disagree wholeheartedly. And George, you talked about this. It's disappointing that we didn't get the percentage boost that we wanted, but banking the 4 points is paramount, and we did that despite the adversity which you mentioned, George. We're playing interstate on a ground that we've had difficulty getting a win at, and you know what? That's whatever. That's fine. You've got to deal with that. Viney being the laid out, Baker comes in. As you mentioned, George, not like for like. I would have preferred Sparrow, but that was obviously not possible with him having played the game at Casey. Tomlinson goes down the first 5 minutes. B-Man, you mentioned it's thrown off all of our matchups. It's taken us a while to get that rhythm back. Ben Brown, it's his first game with the team, and it's going to take a while for him to adapt and form that synergy with the rest of the team. We've faced all that adversity, and to be able to steady the ship and win comfortably in the end, I'll take that in the end. That's got to be win out.
100%. I think I said it on the podcast last week. Is in some respects, I'd prefer this win than us beating them by 70 points. What does that mean, beating them by 70 points? The messaging now from Goodwin can be, if you don't bring, it's obvious. I didn't even listen to his presser. I knew what he was going to say. I finally did, but was, on any day, if you don't bring your pressure and the opposition does, this is AFL at the elite level, you'll get, you'll find yourself behind the 8 ball. And that's the message he'll be able to bring forward that, the players, it's evident. If you don't bring your pressure to the game of footy, we're going to struggle. Certainly we'll struggle next week. You saw that last week in the Cats Swan game. They're a good football team, and if we don't bring pressure on their ball carriers, they'll cut us up. So I think in some respects it's, I said that before the game that a 4 or 5 goal win is perfect. The serious footy teams win these games. It doesn't really matter whether it's scrappy, whether it's pretty, whether we should be flogging them by 12 goals. What does that mean in the context? Is that we beat Richmond by 5 goals? Should have we only beaten them by 3 points because we're as good a team as them? I mean, it makes no sense, that sort of that sort of comparison. You win these games, you move on. I think in 2018, these are the games we were at risk of dropping. 2019 and 20, obviously, as well. At the end of the season, the 4 points are the ones that are going to make or break a top 4 or even top 2. The way we're travelling.
But can't I just enjoy a game of footy without pulling my hair out and being nervous that we're going to embarrass ourselves on not the big stage, because I don't know how many people.
We'll get them. We'll get those matches. Come, the second half of the season, I know we'll talk about our fitness. That told in the end. I mean, speaking of North Melbourne and reflecting on where they're at, and you made the point about where we were at, say, with Neeld. I mean, they made some horrible mistakes, didn't they? Like the 2 goals that Fritter got out the back, where I think Zeeble and I don't know, the other North player went for it, and they sort of fumbled in each other. That was a shocker. And then when the bald-headed North Melbourne player barely made an effort, it seemed like, to get back on Fritsch, or had no awareness that Fritsch was going to waltz past him into the goal square.
None whatsoever.
I mean, that's the sort of stuff that, we'd be talking about 5 years ago on the podcast, saying, well, that's so typical Melbourne. Like, that's but come the second half of the end of the season, the last sort of 8-9 games, our fitness and our strength will really start being a huge factor. So, these teams, the North, unfortunately for them, they'll struggle big time come the end of the season, where their young players start really feeling the season, and we'll still be going fine.
It was interesting.
George, go ahead.
Yeah, it was just interesting that Bin Man mentioned the Richmond Footscray game. I think it was certainly in the first half, Richmond were 3 to 4 goals behind, and that's just what's going to happen at some point in the game for every team. But as Bin Man said, it's all about the pressure. You just keep applying the pressure. If you're a seriously good side, the lesser sides can't apply the pressure. They will make mistakes, but they'll only make mistakes if you bring your best game to the field. We did in the second half, and the message, I think, is getting there slowly. It's hard for us supporters with a long ingrained MFC SS history, expecting the worst to happen. But this is a different side from what we've been watching, in the Neeld years that we talk about.
And I know Andy will talk about individual players and performances. The other fantastic thing, the other great takeaway from this match is who stood up in that second half. It was Jackson, Jordan, who went at 90% disposal efficiency with his 20 kicks. Jackson was enormous. It was Kozzy, his work rate, not just his finishing, but his incredible work rate. It was Rivers rebounding after a pretty average first half and performing really well. Of the senior players, it was really only T-Mac who, I guess Track played well in that second half, but it was really only T-Mac who I thought lifted and showed real leadership. The leadership and example came from those young players, and even Baker, who I thought played pretty poorly in the first half, he improved in the second half. But, I think that's a great sign for the Melbourne Footy Club that, those young players are the ones who really dug in and said, well, we're the ones who are going to make sure we don't lose this game of footy. And in the absence of someone like Viney, who's a talisman, not playing, and everyone else being a bit flat, that was hugely important for where we're at, I think. And again, we'll talk about him, but Jackson was just enormous in that third quarter. He was just outstanding on a day where Gawn probably had his poorest game for 18 months almost. Well, perhaps not, but from last season. And Goldie certainly seems to have his measure often.
George, I was going to pose this to you, and Big Man, you can jump in as well. Just in terms of Cunnington, were we accountable enough to him? He was sort of waltzing everywhere, out of our forward line, out of the middle, everywhere. Do we do anything to him? Because I don't think so. I don't think we took care of him.
Difficult to say because again we're watching this on television. Look, Cunnington's is a good player. He's been injured earlier on this season, so he's only starting to hit his straps, and he managed to hit them against us. Those sort of players you're never going to really hold down, so it wasn't unexpected. But I think the part of the problem was that our players, particularly the midfield, and again probably to do with his structure, they were just so flat. Gawn was flat. Petrarca was flat, particularly in that first half. Oliver was holding things together for a large part of the game, but you're never going to hold someone like Cunnington down all the time. So we'll face this again. Sydney have got some very good midfielders as well, and I don't expect to hold them down totally as well. So it's just the fall of the dice in this case.
Yeah, and I mean, what do you think the alternative is, Andy? That they could have run someone with him or tagged him?
Oh, I don't think we had anyone in the team that could do that. The one guy who I would like to do it, but they don't seem to do that with anymore, is Harms. He's not in the team, but he may come back. But
I think though that speaks. That's the point, really, is that we've talked about this a number of times, haven't we? Philosophically, Goodwin doesn't like to tag because you essentially give up one of your players, and it goes back to, again, without banging on about it, it goes back to pressure, because if once everyone's pressure lifted across the whole 22 players and the 18 on the field, Cunnington's impact dropped off, and so the answer isn't tagging him. The answer is everyone lifting their pressure rating, and he will get pressured out of the game. So it's not just one player going at him; it's every time he goes near the ball, he's either being pressured or there's referred pressure on him. So you don't tag Cunnington. You just make sure that you don't give him as many opportunities. I mean, the other thing is that they killed us in the first half in clearances. I mean, go back to that sort of chestnut and the centre square setup. So he was getting good looks, and he's an excellent footballer, isn't he? Strong, built for that sort of game as well. They played a scrappy game, which that frustrated us. I think frustrated our ball movement. I don't think they went down there thinking it was an easy game. It's just the sort of if people are off, then they're off. So, I don't know that they needed to tag him, or they just needed to collectively lift their effort rating.
Yeah, I don't know why I keep expecting the coaching staff to change what they've been doing, because you're right. That's what they do. They don't go out and tag. They go out to win the ball and curb their influence by us getting first use of the ball.
So
I just get frustrated at times, because when it's not happening and when players are doing just waltzing out of the middle, it's frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they'll probably send Hibbard, I reckon, to Papley this week. So there's a tag for you, and they obviously did Martin, so you'll get a bit of tagging pleasure.
Maybe it's something we have to get used to, Andy, that good teams don't need to tag because you've got good players in the middle. I didn't see too much tagging between Richmond and the Bulldogs game, and they were probably two of the top forward sides in the competition at the moment. It's the lower teams that have to put a tag on players, because you just can't afford, as we were in the years gone by, where Sam Mitchell used to get 40 possessions a game and nobody seemed to be on him. But we really don't need to supply tags when you've got the quality of Oliver and Petrarca in the middle, and other players like Pickett playing in there as well. It becomes a pointless exercise for us.
I guess it's because I have seen teams do it to us, to do it to Clary effectively, putting him off his game, scragging him, and I don't know, maybe it's sometimes Clary gets frustrated and gets put off his game because of that. I just, at times, when things aren't going our way, I feel like we need to do a bit of that too. Fitness was obviously a huge factor, particularly late in the match. They looked cooked in the last quarter, and that was because they were flooding back so hard. Every time they got the ball out of our forward line, they were just confronted by a wall of demons, and it just made their task so much harder. Conversely, we were full of run right to the end, and it's just a testament to Burgess, and I cry myself to sleep at night thinking about Burgess leaving. Hopefully we're taking notes, we're stealing IP, everything we can get out of this guy, because he's been amazing.
Yeah, we hope he's got an apprentice, don't we, that stays on in the job. But I also think that we yet to see the best of the Burgess programs as the season goes on and people get tired.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, when the younger players in particular start to suffer from the injuries but are still able to play, I think we're already seeing some really. I'm super impressed with the fitness being shown by Kozzy in particular.
Absolutely,
unbelievable.
Talk about
for a guy who spent a considerable amount of time away from the club with his family situation just pre-season, he's come back and he is in superb form, but also just his fitness is remarkable. For someone who's fast, you don't expect him, as we saw on the weekend, to be able to be involved in the play on the wing and still go and finish up kicking the goal. It was just incredible. So all credit to the fitness department at the moment. But like I said, I think we're going to see the better of it towards the end of the season, which is could well win us finals that we've been seeking for so long.
It's absolutely spot on, George. That's when we'll get the full payoff. We already are, and it's not without some frustration. You hear the talk about, is the game too long? It drives me nuts. It's been that length for I don't know how long. Probably around the half an hour, a quarter mark for ever and a day, except for last season. We've trained to get fit to play those quarters, and we've got an advantage. And I meant to say a couple of weeks ago after we beat Richmond, I'd be pretty furious if I was a Richmond fan for the next time we end up playing the Tigers. Is it Campbell? Who's not Campbell? They're who's their small forward, number 10 for Richmond?
Castagna?
No, not Castagna. I think of
Rioli.
He came out the next. He was interviewed on RSN, and he was after the Melbourne game, and he noted the shorter quarters. He'd be supportive of them, thinking they're too long. It's like you've just played Richmond, you just played Melbourne, and Scott was saying it as well.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Look who's bleeding about it, Scott. Yeah. He's got the helpless bloody list out there.
I mean, exactly. It's like, come on, and so, I mean, they're obviously not going to change it this season, but it's exactly the right length.
No, I'm not complaining. Adam Tomlinson, excuse me, injury's been confirmed. He's got injured his ACL, missed the rest of the season. It's devastating. You talked about the emotion you saw on his face. He was putting together a great season so far, and he's he must be devastated about that and missing out on what as a team what we're building and what's shaping up to be a great year. Absolutely devastating. So he's gone down early. Luckily, I think luckily we've picked Ben Brown in the team and that Fritter was having a day out because we were able to throw T-Mac down back after he was barely sighted for the early part of the match. How do you think T-Mac went in his roll down back? I'll start with you, Bim Man. And maybe what do you think our back six is going to look like in the coming weeks and months? Well, obviously Tomlinson's not going to be there. Got Petty in the twos. And just on Petty, I wasn't as confident with him replacing May, but I think replacing Tomlinson, and that's no knock on Tomlinson because he's had a fantastic year, but I like Petty maybe in the Tomlinson role and still having May play May's role and leave her as the third man up, Big Man.
Yeah, just on Tomo first, it's just awful, isn't it? I hate seeing those sort of injuries to any player. It's just awful to think all the work that they must put in. And I remember the Vander's talking about the injury on the podcasts and his rehab and how much work went in for years, and he's still back in his struggled hand, isn't he? And he by all accounts, Tomo put in a massive preseason, worked super hard on his defensive game. I think that it's just awful, and he was clearly devastated. So was everyone else around him, and I thought they did really well actually to sort of put that to one side and move on. I guess that's what they've got to do. How did T-Mac going back? I thought he was terrific. He was fantastic in his ability to be proactive, use the ball much better than he did back in the day in 2017 that he got moved forward. Or was it 18?
Yeah, his kicking definitely has improved.
Yeah, it's definitely improved.
I'll hold my breath, but it's much better.
But he's not going back. He's the prototype Frost. Frost built his game on the T-Mac model of, refusing to stay in the defensive back half, wandering up the field, taking speculative kicks inside the corridor. My heart couldn't deal with that again. So it'll be Petty. And by all accounts, Petty and Tomlinson were both earmarked for that lockdown deep fullback position, and on the back of a super preseason, they gave the nod to Tomo, and I think also Petty had a bit of an interrupted preseason as well, so that probably counted against him. But it was, by all accounts, neck and neck until sort of Tomo pulled away a bit. Petty's a natural defender. He played most of his junior footy, as I understand it, as a defender. I think he's a really a star in the making. And so, it's awful for Tomlinson, but I think we're in a very fortunate position with that position, in the sense that it is a really important position structurally, as we've talked about a lot, and we've got the perfect player who I don't think will lose anything actually to have Petty come into that position. And I think any talk of T-Mac going back and filling that is it's just not going to happen. It'll be Petty for 100% for sure. And I'm not sure what I'll do if I'm wrong on that one, but I just can't see. I can't see Goodwin doing it for his own mental health either. So,
George,
yeah, totally and utterly agree there. For Tomlinson, I think it was sad because it was such an innocuous injury. You can understand ACLs when it's a heavy collision or somebody lands on top of your leg or it gets trapped between others. But when it's just a landing off a marking contest, and that's the end of your season and your career for 12 months, it's pretty hard to take. I can imagine the distress that these guys have, and what the prospects they have for the next 12 months of trying to get back on the field. I think I spoke about it previously, but it took us a while to get that structure right again. I'm not, because we're watching on the telly, I couldn't tell when T-Mac actually went back into the back line. I think for a start off, they tried to fill it from within, so to speak. But when you've got your structures which are dependent upon Tomlinson taking that role of taking out the big defender, leaving Lever and May to do their business, and you lose that, you need someone who's capable of doing that. You're depending on people like the wingers to come up and cover the spaces. probably saw the lack of output that came from the back line. They couldn't get the ball to people like Salem and Langdon to move the ball up the field. So it took a little while whenever T-Mac went into the back line to get that structure back in place. And I think that's why we'll have Petty back next week. He trained with the backs during the pre-season. We've also got another 15 rounds to go. We don't want to keep chopping or trying to fill holes or putting Band-Aids over a particular problem when you've got the solution already sitting there. Petty can come in this week and he can play 15 games and rebuild that structure that we've had prior to Tomlinson's injury. So I think it's very important that we look not just to this week. We've got to look ahead for the future as well. And the other thing that happens is you take T-Mac out of the forward line to fill a hole, then you've got a problem up the other end of the ground as well. Now in this game we had it all over the field. We had all sorts of people in the wrong positions, and I think it showed until we stabilised things. So yeah, for me, Petty goes in and the hole's plugged and it's well and truly cemented in place.
Now, I don't want to burst any bubbles here, but you were aware that Petty didn't play in the twos this week, and I believe some people speculated that he might have got injured in the week prior against Richmond. Do you have any more information on that?
Nothing from here, but in the coach's interview, he was almost putting Petty in for next week. If you saw that, he said, Petty will probably come in. We've got T-Mac as well, but he didn't seem to indicate that he wouldn't be available.
All right, that answers that one. Then we'll wait till Thursday because there's always that mystery injury of the week or something that just pops up, like the Viney thing. And just on the Viney thing, I had heard, or someone had posted, I think it was either on Melbourne's one of their social things, or even on Demonland's Facebook thing, someone had written something earlier in the week, last week, that Viney had scans done, and then we didn't hear anything from. And this was just some random poster, a person on the internet, and then nothing else was said. And then all of a sudden, he's a late withdrawal. So, mystery injury of the week. Let's go.
Just before we move on, just to reflect back on the selection for this week, we talked about would they make many changes, and I was saying it's really important. I think that they go into this with a relatively unchanged game and treat it seriously. Not that they wouldn't treat it seriously, but there's no room to experiment or to make 4 or 5 unforced changes for to give players a run or freshen up, or that's showing a disrespect for the opposition for one, but how critical this game and now the next 3 games are. Reflect on the struggles that we had with the few changes that we did have. If we'd added another 3 unforced changes into that mix, we could have well lost that game. If we'd decided to rest, I don't know, Fritter because he had a broken hand, or given chop out to Jackson because he's a young player who needs a break, or Kozzy. Any of them could have, that decision could have cost us the 4 points, which sort of just reinforces the point I was trying to make last week about, each game you have to look at the moment. We're not in a position to be able to, to rest players for the sake of giving a break after the bye. Yep, I'd be all for that if we're still travelling and we've got top 4, but this is our chance to lock in a top 4, and you do not win flags from outside the top 4 with, the Dogs are the exception to prove the rule.
Just on selection from last week, what did you guys make of? I'll start with you, George, of Jones. Was he unceremoniously dumped out of the team after the 300? Was he rested, managed? How did you see that?
To quote, to use a quote, I've got no idea. All of the above, possible. Look, Jonesy didn't have a great game the previous week. There's no doubt about that. And I think it's important, particularly when you've got a large group of young players and a large group of up-and-coming young players playing well in the VFL that you're not seen to be gifting games to players just for the sake of their names. Jonesy will get his run. I've got no doubt about that. He's very durable. He's obviously still in the mix. The fact that he was named as the medical sub initially in this game, he's still in the mix. Injuries will come. He will get his opportunity. We've got 15 more home and away rounds to go. He'll have plenty of chances to prove his worth in the coming second half of the season, in particular. So not surprising. I think a couple of those up and coming ones last week in the VFL, particularly Sparrow, will get their chances very quickly because of the other injuries. But not surprised that Jones is still there. He's still a very good player. He's not what he was, but we just have to accept that. But this is obviously his last season. I don't think he would even contemplate going around himself. But we're going to see more of Jonesy.
Just a semantics thing. I'm not sure whether he was going to be the medical sub because they don't make that decision till I'm not sure how far out from the game because they don't announce it on the previous day when they announce the team. They just announce 4 emergencies. So it's not clear of those 4 emergencies who was the sub, I guess, and what their thinking was. I thought it was curious not to have Sparrow in there, but I assume that they wanted to give Sparrow a good run at VFL level and to rack up some possessions. And he was fantastic. I watched that Casey game. He was terrific. It looked a class above at VFL level. And the sort of semantic thing is I think they should call that medical sub the 23rd player rather than being omitted because almost 50% and 60% of the games with a medical sub, they're activated. So, it's not quite the same as being omitted if you're coming in and playing as he did. And the games count towards your tally. So the medical sub, even if he hadn't have been activated, Jones, he would have had another game on his tally. So it's a bit of a misnomer to say they're dropped. If the game counts towards your game total, and there's a very good chance that you'll come in and play game time. So that may change the perception a little bit about dropping a player like Jones. I could see him being a really good medical sub actually because he's going to come on and be strong late in games when maybe the younger players are wielding in the opposition. And I thought he was pretty good actually when he came on. He tackled pretty hard and went at the ball, and he was far from our worst player in that second half.
And the experience that he brings and leadership. With just on selection and who they bring, they must have known. I mean, Baker, they brought him down there. I think they obviously knew Viney wasn't going to play. I don't know if it was right at the end. If he's had scans, they didn't have scans, the day before. So they've picked Viney and then Baker's come in. So I don't know. I think they had an opportunity to play a Sparrow or a Bedford, someone that wasn't a winger, so to speak.
Yeah, I thought it was curious selection decision. And, as I said, he didn't have a good first half and, wasn't a fantastic second half either.
All right, we'll move on. Thoughts on Ben Brown's game? Obviously, he's going to take a few games for him to gel with the team, but I thought he did a couple of nice things. The delivery to him, particularly in the first half, or probably the whole game, was atrocious. He did give a very nice tap off to Fritsch for a goal. I thought he was a bit unlucky not to kick that first one. Would have liked to see the vision again. I think it might have cleared the line. Not convinced it was touched on the line, but anyway. But yeah, nice of him to get a couple of goals, and it's going to take a while to get in. Hopefully not too long, but it's got to take a little bit of time to gel with the rest of the team.
I was of the mind that maybe there's, you could possibly play Wiedemann, Brown, Jackson in the same team and T-Mac in the same team. I don't think that anymore. I reckon it's Ben Brown or Wiedemann. Look, that ground is narrow, as we talked last week, and it worked against us actually because it's easier for oppositions to clag it up and make it difficult to move the ball and flood, as exactly as North Melbourne did. I know he's done all right down there, but previously, but it also obviously impacts the leading lanes, and we like to lead out to the pockets, and there's less space. But he's not going to be a pressure forward, really, is he? And he seemed a bit slow, so perhaps I was a little bit underwhelmed. But maybe I'm being a bit unfair, and it's his first game back after a fairly long injury layoff, and first game in our team, obviously, down there in Tassie in front of his family. So, I'm certainly not saying he's not going to be terrific for us, but yeah, it's a bit underwhelmed. And I can't. The main reason I don't think you can have Brown and Wiedemann together now is that he's not going to be a pressure forward. And I watched the VFL game, and Weed was good, but he still didn't tackle. And you can't have two forwards in your team anymore that don't tackle. And so it's I don't know, and he's not the most mobile player either. So yeah, I don't know, George. What did you think of his game?
I thought we got exactly what we paid for, so to speak. He's a leading forward. He can kick very well.
He's got a great kick.
Yeah, he's got a great and can kick from a long way out as well. We haven't had a forward like that. Well, Hogan for a short period of time, but we haven't had a forward like that for a long period of time. The other players have got to get used to him as well. He's been injured pre-season. So there wasn't the opportunity to be able to run the patterns with the mids bringing the ball in and others bringing the ball into him. So we're only just starting to see the systems working with him. He still kicked 2 goals. More importantly, I think, was Fritsch kicked 6 and Kozzy 3, and I think you could almost give a few of those to Brown.
Yeah,
Brown's presence.
Yeah,
that he was competing. Kozzy roamed the pack a couple of times off his directly. So it's going to be a nightmare again for the opposition defenders. You've got this great big target that we've now got, and you've got these other guys that can feed off him. It's going to be something very frightening for the opposition defenders, but it's a big positive for us, I think. Like I said, we've got what we wanted, and I think if we're going to be serious in the finals, we've got to have that sort of player up there as well. We can't depend on someone like a Fritsch being the major goal kicker going into finals. No. We've got to have something else.
I think you make a really good point, George, about the importance of him bringing the ball down, and not just bringing the ball down. If he doesn't mark it, he'll bring it down, hopefully, but in a predictable way. So forward of the centre, he's a natural forward that way, and the players who are natural crummers, like Kozzy, they'll pretty soon know where to get to the fall of the ball in front of him. The other thing is that you can't underestimate the importance of an accurate kick. The second, both these, the long one that you mentioned, Andy, that got touched on the line, and then his other long shot from, that was probably, close to 45 metres out, just went arrow straight, didn't it? And, it makes such a big difference when you're taking your opportunities. Just as we saw with T-Mac last week against Richmond, and even the goal he kicked from the same spot against the Hawks, that taking your chances when you get them. And Fritsch this week, he was dead-eye dick as well. So it makes a massive difference to a team that's forward half footy that looks to trap the ball in, which is another thing, by the way, that we didn't do at all well in that first half, is to take those chances when you get them through accurate kicks, just super critical.
If you count his run up, it's probably about 70 or 80 metres, the kick. You mentioned the pressure, forward pressure. How important is it from your key forward to be doing that? Understand guys like Nibbler and Spargo and Melksham, you want to see that the tackling, you want to see the forward pressure and keeping the ball in. How important is it for someone like Wiedemann and Ben Brown to do that? I wouldn't have thought it's as important. Obviously, you want to see good efforts from them defensively, but I don't know. For me, it's not high on the priority of what I want to see from them.
No, it's not as important, but it's still important, and you've seen that with T-Mac this year. I thought his pressure has been. I think his pressure has been terrific this season up in that forward half, and it's not just the sort of tackles, but it's the little hands in the contest and not giving up on a contest and tackling when there's the opportunity to do so. So yeah, of course, it's not as important, but the problem is that you can't have more than one player who's not applying that sort of level of pressure, which is why I think that I've come around to you can't really have Weed and Brown in the same team because the two of them means you've got two players not putting on sufficient pressure.
With T-Mac out of the forward line this week, it also meant that Ben Brown was often double teamed. I don't know, did you notice that? And that sort of made it a bit harder for him. So having, whether it's Weed in there or T-Mac as well, changes that dynamic a little bit. I don't know, like you said, George, I don't know when T-Mac went out of the forward line, but I don't think it was straight away.
No, it was in the third quarter, I reckon.
He was just missing from the forward. So he wasn't sort of, I don't know what the setup was, but Ben Brown seemed to have two guys on him every time the ball went in there.
Yeah, and North Melbourne would certainly know the way he plays as well and how to negate his influence. So, I think it was Walker was hanging off him all the time, basically from, I think someone said, from holding onto his hips rather to stop him getting that leap, because once he jumps, nobody can stop him. He's 2 meters tall and he's got a great vertical leap. So stop him getting up in the air is the whole plan. But we didn't help out. There were a couple of kicks to him, one from Baker and another from A and B, which were absolute utter shockers. He was on his own inside the 50 leading, and they missed him by 10 metres.
There was one we got a goal from, actually, where Baker put it on his head.
Yeah.
Ended up going out the back to Fritsch, I think, for one of his gimme goals. So,
yeah.
I think, look, I'm being a bit too tough. And I think he's a player who is perfectly suited for the MCG.
Yeah,
because he will have that width and that space. The corridor, he'll be able to lead more directly up the corridor or on an angle and have some space to lead into that that he's not going to get at a narrow ground like the one he played on the weekend, or not as much. So, in terms of a player suited to the G, he's perfect. He reminded me a bit of Bennett, actually. Tall and sort of runs in straight lines and a huge kick. An accurate one too. Bennett was terrifically accurate.
I was just trying to have a look because I remember, here it is. Can you see how many games? I'm not sure he's played too many games at the G. Yeah, so he's played the majority of his footy at Docklands. He's played 66 games at Marvel. He's only played 10 at the MCG. Most of them, I think, are against Melbourne. He's played 19 at Blundstone, where we just played them. So he's played more there in Tasmania than he has, and in particular Hobart, than he has in at the G.
Yeah,
so
he'll love the G, and he's an MCC. Or he'll be an MCC favourite, won't he? Sort of the hair and the he's got Cold Hero written all over him.
I mean, he's almost played more at the Gabba than he has at the G. So, sorry, I just dropped my pen. All right, let's move on. I might add, if you do want to join us on the show tonight, have that ability. 0390163666, 0390163666. We love hearing from Demonlanders and fans of the podcast. So give us a call. Let's talk about some individual efforts. Fritsch, capitalised on every opportunity, ended the day with 6 goals, 1 behind from 6 marks. If not for some more accurate kicking this year, and had he not missed the week with the broken hand, he could very well be in contention for the Coleman medal. But now that he's going to miss another week, that's going to be a bit difficult. He's kicked 18 goals, 8 this year. And just a shame that he's going to miss next week. How how do we cover him this week? He's going to be out. So what does our forward line look like now? If Petty's going to come in, it means T-Mac doesn't go back. Do we just play Ben Brown and T-Mac, or do we bring Wiedemann in? I know you said you can't play him in, but now that Fritsch is gone, what do we do? Do we bring in a Crummer or?
Well, I mean, Melksham is the player that when Fritsch went out, it seems to me he's the player who can stand up and get you 2 goals, just as he did against the Hawks. I can't see why they just wouldn't revert to that with, you've got Brown, Jackson, and T-Mac, that's fine, and Melksham. I think that they don't need to bring Wiedemann in, and I hope they don't, because they're a fast-moving team, the Swans, and will be needing to put their game is very much quick disposals, quick kicks, and if we don't put pressure on them, they will beat us. I have no doubt about that. If we put that level of pressure as we did on the Swans, as we did in the North, that the Swans will be 6-7 goals up at halftime, and we won't be coming back from that. I just don't think you can have Brown and Wiedemann in the same side. They're not going to drop Brown because, I mean, leaving aside anything else, he did kick 2 goals and as George noted, set up a few. So, he's not going to get dropped on that performance. Where that leaves Weed, I'm not entirely sure, but I hope they don't bring him in. I just think that it's two players who aren't going to pressure enough, and, I don't know that they need to bring another player into. They could just roll Melksham back, I would have thought.
Kozzy. Wait, before I go on to Kozzy, Fritsch, should we be taking this further? Or will we? I don't think we will, but should we, George?
I don't think we will. It's the AFL has shown head-high contact is going to get you a week. Regardless, it wasn't a good look on the television. There's been people suggesting that he was trying to protect his broken hand, but really it was a forearm straight to the other guy's head, who was taken off the ground. It's not a good look. You're going to get a week for that. It wasn't a comparison, I don't think, with the Hawkins incident where Hawkins threw his elbows back. It's just something you can't do these days and get away with it. And unfortunately, the match review is inconsistent, but I don't think appealing a positive decision from the MRO is going to get you anything in the current environment.
Yeah, I'm really, I take your point, particularly around the hit to the head, but I mean, not reckless, and then reckless, it's a fine. And, the Dangerfield last year in the grand final, that was much worse than this, and he got off. And that's, as you point out, George, the problem is the inconsistency, and the frustration is it's one person's sort of subjective perspective on an incident. It didn't look great, though, I have to say. And I, at first, live, I didn't think it looked so bad, but the replay didn't look good. He had the option of not elbowing him to the head, so he was always going to be in trouble. Though the question I'd have is, for both of you, I guess, is what's the downside in, apart from the 10 grand that you put up and lose if you lose the case, what's the downside? The feeling, I mean.
Can they?
But my understanding is you don't.
Extra week?
No, it's
not
still
anymore.
a week. So the worst case scenario is maybe some reputational thing about the D's kicking up a storm, but I don't know that would be certainly not amongst D's fans. The worst case scenario is 10 grand down the kicker, but if we win this game because Fritsch is in, well, you got your 10 grand back and more. So I'd appeal. I hear what you're saying, George, and I'm not sure that I disagree. And so perhaps I'm being a bit cynical, but I can't see what the downside is apart from the 10 grand in putting up an appeal and trying to get it downgraded to reckless so he gets a fine and can play on Saturday night, because it's going to be a super critical game, this one. Obviously to keep our streak going, but they're a team that we want to keep down below us. They're a contender, the Swans, and we want to beat them. And we're a better chance of beating them with Fritsch in the side. So for me, I'd be appealing all day, every day.
If you want to contribute to the Kickstarter campaign that I've just started, I've just seen on my Twitter feed on the couch have talked about, they've said they've used the Patrick Dangerfield comparison with Bailey Fritsch. I haven't listened to it. It's 47 seconds. Maybe we'll just play this for a second. Let me cue it up. Here we go.
Fritsch has been outed by the tribunal for a week. Do you think he should appeal?
I reckon they're going to look at it. Our thoughts on head-high contact, and we don't condone it. It was really instinctive. It was quick. It was ugly. There's a school of thought that Petraka sort of pushed Powell, so Powell was lower. And, whether they'll look at the precedent, that I know precedents don't always work, whether the Dangerfield will come into it.
They're allowed to use them now, though, Gaz, at the tribunal.
They are?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't really get involved in tribunal too often, but, I mean, when you look at this, there's a push from Petraka. He's a bit lower than thought. That's instinctive. Look, if he wears a week, he wears a week, but I wouldn't be surprised if they go and ask the question.
Clearly an accidental.
Bloke on the left got off, bloke on the right got a week.
A bit of a shame given he's in such unbelievable
he's in ripping
form.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, I always disagree with that mob, but on this occasion, seeing they're backing up what I'm saying, I think they're geniuses.
All right, let's move on. Watch this space. Kozzy, kid's electrifying. We say it every week. His work rate is outstanding. One of you alluded to that before. There was one play in the third quarter in particular where he ended up running into goal and kicking it. He started on the wing, was involved in a few handballs along the chain, and he just kept running and running, and he was rewarded in the end. It's kick 3 for the match. Seems like he's got a good tank on him for a young kid. So more of that, please. And it's only just the beginning.
Amazing tank. And at the end of that run, to have the fitness to balance up, take a few steps and kick it straight through the centre. I mean, how often do you see players having put that sort of level of effort in and then just at the last, just needing to kick the goal, just haven't got any gas left in the tank and spray it to the right or left? He was phenomenal. That handball too that set up another one of Fritsch's 6 goals was a thing of beauty, albeit the ball looked about a foot outside the boundary line. I think half the team stopped, but that was a terrible bit of play. It was Melksham-like corralling effort on Jackson, who got it over to Kozzy, and it was a magic. There seems to be a skill that a lot of players are doing, that handball into the ground that gets through underneath almost a player's hand, opposition player's hand, and it's just so clever.
It's a basketball move, George, isn't it?
It certainly is. The thing I really, really like about Kozzy is not only is he spectacular, we've got plenty of players in the competition who are probably just as good as him, but we've finally got one ourselves, is that in that third quarter he turned the game with those two goals, basically off his own effort.
Well, and Jackson
and well. Yeah. We've got a match turner, which is more than a match winner. So it's been a long, long time since we've had someone of that capability. Probably going back to the Aaron Davey sort of years. In just quickly off the top of my head, for someone like that of that capability, just to turn a game all off their own boot. So it's remarkable that we've got him. It's fantastic that we've got him. Great. Fabulous recruiting again by Jason Taylor. What was he? Pick 12, I think.
Kozzy?
Yeah.
8, wasn't it? 8. I don't know what it was in the end after all.
But, it wasn't an obvious one to everybody, but fabulous to have him in the side. He's going to keep people coming through the gates for a long, long time.
Absolutely. And one of the things that sort of backing up what you're saying, George, is yes, he's flashy, does the magic thing. We're going to have lots of Kozzy, the Mozzie, all of that sort of stuff through his career, and he's high. He'll take his share of screamers. But what excites me as much as all of that electric play is two things. Is as Grapevine pointed out 4 or 5 weeks ago, his footy IQ's off the chart. He's a natural footballer who knows where to be in a contest. He knows when to go up a level. But the thing I really like about him and Jackson and Rivers and Jordan is just their competitors. They're really, really strong competitors. He's pulled his head in a little bit this year in terms of how fierce he is at the when he tackles. But he is a young fellow who doesn't like to lose contests, let alone games of footy. And he really did will himself, didn't he, George, in that quarter to sort of stamp himself and make a difference, as did Jackson. I thought Jackson was phenomenal in that third quarter and really showed a level of maturity, but also a competitiveness to say, well, I'm the man here. I'm not sure what the deal with Gawn was, but they let Jackson pretty much run as the ruck in that third quarter for I'd be guessing, but it seemed to be 60 to 70% ruck time in that third quarter, and he's did some beautiful moves, and his hands were fantastic. So two players are really competitive. They really want to win, and Kozzy's in every contest. He doesn't give up on any contest, and that goal, even though that ball was probably out at his desire to stay in that contest and make something and ultimately make a goal is just you can't buy that. That's just absolute gold. And then on top of that, all his individual skill and brilliance is just icing on the cake.
I think I like the commentator's statement that it was Wayne Harms was the boundary umpire in that particular case. So
that was a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, go.
Yes, I was just going to add some more about Luke Jackson. I think we're going to talk about him. So, firstly, congratulations to him for his Rising Star nomination, a second one in his particular case. I think this was one of the best coaching moves I've seen.
I was going to say that.
Yeah,
kudos to whoever did that.
Yeah. It wasn't just putting Luke Jackson into the ruck. It was, I think, what was happening was that Goldstein was negating Gawn. Basically, we've become used to Gawn marking heavily around the ground, not only getting the hit outs, but really having an influence around the ground. By putting Jackson into the ruck for that long period of time, they basically took Goldstein out of the game, which was the critical factor. Jackson was better than, I think their second ruck was Tom Campbell. And Jackson was so much better than Tom Campbell, whereas if they'd left Gawn in, Goldstein would have at least negated, maybe even beaten Gawn in this particular game. So that was a brilliant coaching move on behalf of the coaching panel just to get him in. Jackson then topped it off with the icing on the cake with his performance. All of a sudden we've got an extra midfielder in there. All of a sudden we've got a guy who's putting pressure right up the ground, and it's easy to forget just how few games this guy's played. Again, yeah. Jason Taylor will be chased by all the other clubs when his contract runs out, because anyone who's able to pick up this quality of player, and I think Jason Taylor put his hand up to get Jackson. He knew how good he was, and Kozzy as well, and Rivers as well. He really put his neck out to get these quality players, and boy, are we seeing the benefits of that.
And the other one is Jordan.
Jordan, of course, yeah.
Player, 90% disposal efficiency of his 20 possessions. He just keeps racking him up, and he reminds me so much of McDonald. So James McDonald. So it's a terrific number that they've given him, and he really is a clever footballer. And that goal he kicked was again high footy IQ. To get the ball on the boot so quickly, he knows where the goal is, and he was set up beautifully for that row from that. I think it was I can't recall if it was a marking contest or it might have been a ball up. But it was just super clever, and it was really important timing. We really needed a goal at that point to sort of edge ahead.
Yeah, all of those players, Rivers is the other one, they all look like they've played 50 to 100 games. And that's, like you said, their footy IQ is just remarkable for players who are so young. And it's backed up by the skills that they've got as well. It's just fantastic.
Imagine once they've played 50 or 100 games. That I'm excited about. Just back to Luke Jackson, I'm often critical of the coaching team not making moves, sort of out of the box sort of stuff, and it's not terribly out of the box because he is a ruckman, but to do what they did, clap for them. He had an absolute mammoth third quarter. He had about 10 or 11 disposals. Provided that chop out for Max. 22 disposals, his most ever. 2 marks, 7 hit-outs, 2 clearances, 6 score involvements, and the goal. And then just on, you want to add something to that?
I was just going to say, Andy, you can say it. Kudos to Goodwin.
Yes. All right. I'll give this one to Goody. Thanks, Goody. just quickly on Jordan, and I mentioned last week because I see his name. I see his name constantly being thrown up, and not so much on D-Milan. This is more on social media as one to get dropped. People on Facebook continually just say drop Jordan. I don't know what these people are seeing. I don't know what game they're watching. He's really putting together a good little resume. He's obviously not as flashy as Kozzy, but he's definitely in our best 22. I think you mentioned he had 22 disposals, and his disposal efficiency is fantastic. But 7 tackles as well is great because he's not just getting the disposals, but he's putting a lot of pressure on the opposition, and I really love him.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just looking at the disposal efficiency, Hibbard, McDonald, who played at least half of the game down back, Trent Rivers and Langdon, who pushes back defensively pretty hard, and James Jordan, who plays a lot off the sort of half-back flank, as I've pointed out before, all north of 90% disposal efficiency, and all up around except for Rivers, who only had 13 possessions. The rest all 15, 16 plus possessions. So,
and that's really good from Langdon because, the knock on him was that his disposal wasn't great, and I think I've seen it improve out of sight definitely this year, on last year as well. Yeah. I didn't see much of him before at Freo, so I can't really talk to that, but that was the knock on him when he came to Melbourne.
Yeah, and just he wasn't on the running sheet, but it'd be a bit remiss for not to. It was next up, Andy. Oliver, I was just about to say.
I was going to even just gloss over Oliver, but go for it. I thought he obviously lifted in the second half.
He was a big factor in the second half, and he had 17 contested possessions, and I don't know what the split between the first half was and the second half. He was terrific in that second half and won the ball. And it was interesting. The commentators made a point about him standing way off at the centre bounce, way off the centre. And they were making the point about, I think Simpkin was on him and taking Simpkin away from the ball. And it was actually, I think, a really great example of how we're setting up and how the point it's time made when he called in about the way we're spread so wide at that centre clearances, which it's risky because there's space for them to win it. If they win it, there's a chance they're going to run into space and be able to deliver it into their forward line, as they did a couple of times. But if we win it, he's hitting the pack at pace from distance, so he's got a full head of steam up when he hits the contest, and he's really so much more damaging, as we've talked about this year. He's been a really much more damaging player, and for a player of his ability to take that next step I think it's been huge for the club. And the other thing that really jumped out for me is that he kicked 2 on the left foot, including the goal that he kicked was a left footer, wasn't it? And another kick to Petrarca that, unfortunately, Petrarca, I don't know what happened. They were red hot on calling players to play on, and it was a gorgeous weighted sort of 45, 50-metre kick off the left foot into space that Track ran onto. It was a fantastic kick, and I can't recall Oliver kicking very often on the left foot. I might be mistaken there, but both of them surprised me, and both of them were brilliant kicks.
We've got a caller. Good evening. You're on the air. Who am I talking to?
Yeah, this is Garbo.
G'day, Garbo. How you going?
All right. Yeah, just wondering your thoughts on Spargo and Alex Neil-Bullen in relation to what they bring to the team above and beyond just kicking goals, and what maybe the team might look at as far as bringing someone like a Kyle Chandler or a Bedford or something like that in their place.
Well, we've, in the past few weeks, we've been talking about the pressure that both of them bring. I don't think Neil-Bullen brought that pressure this week. I don't think he had any tackles at all. In fact, I think he got caught with the ball probably 3 or 4 times himself. So he really let himself down this week. I liked Spargo's game more so than Nibbler this week. Boys, do you want to weigh in? George, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, very unimpressed from A and B this week. I think he had 10 possessions with 6 clangers. He was on the end of a couple of possession chains that he just completely and utterly stuffed up. I think the only reason that he'll stay in the team this week is because we've got a number of other changes that need to be made. Charlie Spargo, however, is completely different. When he tackles, you stay tackled, and that's utterly important these days, the way football's being played. And again, if we're going to lose Fritsch out of the forward line, we need to have those sort of players in there and doing their job like Spargo does. He chips in when he needs to do, and his delivery is actually quite good. So, much prefer to have a Charlie Spargo in the side than an A and B at the moment.
I disagree, George. I think, sure, he had not a great game. It's his first average game of the season, Nibbler. He's a best 22 lock. He's not going out of this side, particularly off the back of one average game. On the MCG on Saturday in the open space, if you go to the game, just watch him for a while. Watch the running he does and the patterns he runs. It's not just the distance he covers. That's probably the least of it, actually. It's the high-intensity running to put pressure and referred pressure on. He wasn't the only one in our team who didn't put the right, anywhere near the right levels of pressure on, who made mistakes. I thought Brayshaw was as bad, if not worse, than Nibbler. He looked like he'd smoked cones before the game. I reckon there's one of the interesting things about Spargo is that I'd urge people to listen to Garbo. It's a big one. If you have not listened to it, interview that he did after the Richmond game, or perhaps it was before, on the MFC site, and it's the Talking Points one, I think it's called. And he talks about the pressure that him and Kozzy put on. Nibbler's been highlighted by Goodwin a couple of times as being a key leader at the club. And it's not just his work on field, but it's his training standards off field and the effort he puts in on the track. All 3 players, Kozzy, Spargo and Nibbler, are really important to how we play footy at the moment. And there's not a chance in Hades that Nibbler's going to get dropped, or he won't get dropped all season.
Garbo, what do you think?
Yeah, I guess I was just wondering how much leeway they get if they're not kicking goals, given they are forwards. Press is obviously a big part of their game, but you want to see them get a few every now and again.
Well, it talks to that point, Spargo, in that interview, and basically goals are way down the list of KPIs for those players. So they create goals, and we've scored over 100 points, I think, in every game this season. Certainly, we've been offensively a threat. Our inside 50 scoring ratio is huge, and that's what you want to see collectively, the team scoring, not individuals scoring goals. And their pressure, their inside 50 pressure is really probably one of the fundamental factors in our scoring. So I reckon, Garbo, their goals, except for Kozzy, you'd want him to get it because he's a crummer. But particularly for Spargo and Nibbler, I don't reckon goals would even be on their, the top 2 or 3 KPIs that they'd be asked to produce.
Anything else, Garbo?
Fair enough. Yeah, probably similar thing on Melksham. What do you reckon his KPIs are and his role is in the team? Because he seems to, I don't know, drift up the ground a fair bit, and I don't know whether that's his strong suit. Like, if they're going to play him in that role, he'd be better off, with a Sparrow or another mid Harms, for instance, rather than him if he's not in the forward 50 getting the ball or doing much there.
I'll give that one to George.
And he doesn't pressure the ball. So,
yeah.
George, your favourite player.
Yeah, this is most unfair. For a long time I've said Melksham doesn't supply sufficient pressure. That the way the game's being played certainly in the last couple of years, he's looking too often for the cheap kick out the back that people notice when he gets it and is able to get it, but he's not doing enough work for my liking in the forward line. He was selected a lot of times last year on the back of I don't know what. His tackling was virtually non-existent, and again, he's starting to show the same sort of characteristics this year as well. He just doesn't run hard. When you see the ball coming out of the forward line, you'll see Melksham trotting along behind, not going at full pace. That sends a really bad message, I think, to the rest of the players.
I reckon it's an excellent question what his KPIs are, because, as I say, I think it's pretty evident what Nibblers are and Spargo. And Spargo says as much in that talking points. What Melks are, I'm not sure. I wanted to watch. I didn't get a chance. And I urge anyone who's interested in watching individual players. I've mentioned this before on Demonland and I think the podcast as well, AFL Provision on the AFL.com. It used to be for Live Pass members only. It's now open to anyone, and you can watch the vision of every involvement of a player. And I meant to do it of Melksham's because, I was really down on his performance last year and his lack of pressure, his lack of tackling. His numbers were appalling last year for tackling. I think he only had 8 or 10 tackles for the season, something crazy like that. And
he's had 3 tackles this week. He's had 17 possessions, 6 marks. Those numbers are better.
Yeah, that's right. Last year. Which is why I wanted to watch his vision because I'm, for me, I'm worried I've got a pretty solid confirmation bias against him, and he's such a good kick when he hits it, and he did hit a couple of really good kicks on the weekend. So I do want to watch that vision to see, but I think it's a really good question as to what his KPIs are. And I would have thought they are score involvements. So how many score involvements did he have this week?
I'll bring that up in one sec. He was involved in a nice play. There was a nice play where Jackson sort of got the ball on the wing, did a beautiful turn on his left, and he's found Melksham, who took a really nice mark sort of coming through a pack, and then he's kicked it, almost put it down Ben Brown's throat, but it didn't come off. Score involvements. Hold on a sec.
Yeah.
Going down the list, I can't see his name yet, so can't be too many.
He had four score involvements. So, yeah, look, not too bad. I mean, when you look at score involvements, 10 for Bailey Fritsch, it's obviously kicked 6-1. So I presume they're all 7 of them score involvements. But, Pickett 9, Track 8, Jordan 7, Jackson 6, Gawn 5, Oliver 5. So it's, if it is score involvements, he's middle of the rung there. So, I think it's a really good question, Garbo.
Anything else, Garbo?
Yeah. No, that was it. Just keep up the good work, yeah.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate the call. Thank you.
Thanks, Garbo.
Cheers. That was Garbo. Great call. If you want to join us on the program while we're still up and about, 0390163666, 0390163666.
I'll go to bat for Nibbler, but it's a big ask for me to go to bat for Melksham. But I am, as I say, I'm sort of do have this concern that I've got a confirmation bias. So I will look at his vision to see what it's like. And yeah, again, for anyone who's interested, it's a great way of seeing a player, see what they did during the game, because it's all their involvements, including their pressure acts. So, a player who's only got maybe 10 disposals might have 15, 20 involvements on this vision. It's a really good way to sort of to have an subjective view of an objective view of how a player's played.
While we're talking about vision, and we were talking about kicking before, how we've got a number of players that we've identified with sort of over 90% disposal efficiency. I'd encourage people to have a look at, there was a clip last week from Burgess in the injury report. And if you look at the background while that injury report was on, they had kick to kick at training, and Choco Williams has set up a set of goal posts, probably only about a metre or two apart, and the players not only have to kick as per normal, but they had to kick it through this 1 to 2 metre space. So I think we're starting to see some effects on the field of constant training to improve the kicking, which I think Ben Mann has been very supportive of over the years.
Oh, absolutely. And you mentioned Langdon, Andy. His kicking is 100% improved. And the goal he kicked, the set shot goal he kicked, didn't deviate. It went straight through. And he seems to be more aggressive. Like, he's going for goal more often. His kicking has improved a lot this season, and it's no mean feat for a player at his stage of his career to go up a level with his kicking. It must be a pretty difficult thing to do, and you have to say that Williams has had a big impact in that space.
He's kicked 7 goals, 3 this year, Langdon. Last year he's kicked 2 goals, 8. So that's a big improvement. It's almost the reverse, and it's only 7 games in. So
and his field kicking's better too. He's been much more reliable. So George, it's obviously a bugbear / pet hate of mine, and but makes such a difference when you see the opposition when they were turning it over, and it's like flashbacks to some of the periods where our kicking's been poor, and it's definitely improved. I think they're going for less really risky kicks, and it's there's a lot of 20-metre kicks. That was really evident against Richmond last week, I thought. But players like T-Mac in particular, for instance, he's not going for things outside his sort of range, and even Hunt similarly has been, I think his kicking's improved quite a lot, and it makes a big difference for him because he can undo so much of his good work if he turns it over in dangerous positions. So it makes a massive difference to those scoring chains not breaking down and obviously not giving turnover goals.
Yeah, and we're seeing it actually up forward as well. If you remember the early games where Kozzy had plenty of opportunities and just seemed not to be able to find the goals. He hasn't missed all that often in recent games, but also Fritsch as well. Fritsch was, for me, a 50% chance of getting from a set shot. Well, he's been dead-eyed for the last couple of weeks, and it's just his progressive improvement across the ground with all of these players, and ultimately that's going to win you games, as probably that happened in this game.
Yep.
That goal that Fritsch kicked, I think it was the second one in the third quarter. He needed to nail that to keep the momentum going, and it was just arrow straight. So we're seeing it across the whole board, and I think the recruitment of Williams might have been one of the masterstrokes again in the off-season.
And it's interesting to say that the thing you picked up in the background of the injury report, that's a good pickup, George, kicking through like almost a funnel. His kicking had developed a bit of an arc in it, and the ball flight, Fritsch, and he seems to be kicking it a lot more, much more arrow-like, and Langdon as well.
Yeah. I was just going through my notes. I don't think we need to really talk about Max. Obviously, had one of his worst games. You can forgive the big guy. Hope he bounces back. The only with Viney being out, how are we going to cover that?
For me, the obvious one is Swallow. I mean,
you did it again.
Sparrow. Swallow's not so obvious. Sparrow is much more obvious. Anyway, you know who I mean.
Well, we're going to miss that. We're going to miss that grunt. I like Sparrow, but
we're going to miss that grunt. My bigger concern is it's a foot injury again.
Yeah, well, that was my next point. We've seen that rear its ugly head before. He missed a lot of footy in 2018 before he came back for the finals. Yeah, I really hope. They're saying 2 to 3 weeks, but we've seen 2 to 3 weeks turn into longer. Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully it's not a break, apparently, from what they were saying. I think it was today or yesterday. But
it's a hot spot.
It's a hot spot,
on his toe, which is that different to his foot? I guess it's not the plantar fascia or...
Yeah.
We need Weber to call in and give us an accurate diagnosis.
Doctor or a physio, 039016. 6. Go ahead.
Yeah, Sparrow seems to be the logical player to come in and replace him. He's a genuine mid. I think he had 32 possessions this week. The small bit of vision that I've seen from the VFL, he was in everything.
He was. I watched that game, George, and he was solid, made good decisions, and he seemed to be really a real want, as they like to say. He was contesting hard, and he looked like he'd been told to go for it, and you'll be back in the seniors soon enough. But get your 30-odd possessions, and you'll be back in the big show pretty soon. That's how he played. The other player that it's interesting we haven't spoken about at all since he'd gone out. Very little sort of discussion about him on Demonland either. Who played in that games was Harms coming back. So he must be a chance in the next few weeks. But to be honest, I'd have Swallow ahead of him, not least because Harms is coming back from Sparrow. Not least because Harms is coming back from a break. But Harms I thought he played a funny game in that Casey game. He looked a bit selfish, took a couple of shots at goal where he had players on. And the coaches aren't looking for him kicking a goal from 45 metres. They're looking for him doing the team thing and hitting up the short 25-metre target to make certain of the goal, because he missed both, or you kick one of them and miss the other.
It's hard when you're playing the opposition that we were playing. We absolutely murdered them. It was over 100 points, and it's probably hard not to layer eyes.
Well, it wouldn't be hard if you want to get in the seniors in, and that's what you're told by the coaches. You're not getting in if you play selfish football. You're not getting into my team, and that's what Goody would have been like.
Well, I'm sure he would have got. He probably would have got that talking to definitely after the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the important thing about Sparrow is structurally he's the right player. He's a genuine mid. When we didn't replace Viney with a genuine mid, we saw the flow-on effects this week. If we put Sparrow back into the middle, that means that Brayshaw can go back to the wing where he's more comfortable these days. So there's all these flow-on effects that I think we need to bring into the consideration, not just the next player who's available.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, there I am. The no 15 play on call is absolutely ridiculous. It looks like it's an attempt to keep the game moving, but the inconsistency that's applied with it is just a joke. And I get that the umpires aren't living, breathing tape measures, but it's just beyond a joke. It could have cost. Seems to have cost Geelong the game, and boo-hoo to them. But I would have been absolutely...
Cry me a river.
Yeah, I would have been absolutely livid if that happened to us, if we had taken that mark. And and then a couple of the other decisions or non-decisions were equally frustrating. You just know that next week they'll move on to some other silly rule that they're spruiking that week, and they'll forget about that one. But that's just that it's a part of our game, in the adjudication of the game, that's so frustrating. We saw it with that protected space that in the last few years. Some weeks they were hot on it, other weeks they didn't care. The deliberate out of bounds as well. It's a joke. I don't know how you fix it. It's a mess.
I must be in an argumentative mood, but I actually like the fact that they're calling play on. I'd rather them get it wrong, err on too long than too short. I can't stand those 10-metre kicks. So I was happy for one that Geelong lost it that way. That thrilled me. That was just terrific. And it was actually, I've mentioned a few times on Demonland that we've had some luck this season, and then, of course, we lose a player with an ACL, so I better shut up about that. But it was great that Sydney won that game, because they'll come in off the emotional high, having beaten Geelong, and now we get to play them. Whereas if they'd lost a close one, that changes that sort of psychology of the next game. So I think we've got them at a good time in terms of that. And I was absolutely thrilled that the Cats went down. So I'd change the rule to 20 metres, to be honest, because those short, dinky 10-metre kicks just drive me insane.
Which would you prefer, Andy, the current rule or a genuine 20?
I think a genuine 20. I mean, I'd prefer consistency even across a game, because sometimes you see them. I don't care what it is. It's just a bit more consistency. And as I said, I get that they're not going to, they can't get a tape measure out at the time. But yeah, maybe make it 20 so it at least looks. The ball's got to move a bit further, but
yeah. The frustration a bit is those sorts of, they get a memo and then there's a game or two that they're hot on a particular rule. Like the other one that does frustrate me that from this game is how quick they were to call play on. And it seemed to be random, like, players weren't moving off the mark. And
not at all, Max. At one time they just said play on, he hadn't even moved.
No, and Track as well. And it ended up causing Track could have kicked for goal at one point from about 45 metres, and he was sort of looking inboard as they do. And he called play on, and he looked confused. They ended up kicking in on the full or near on the full. And it's like they've got the memo during the week. They're red hot on it. And as you say, next week it'll be forgotten. There'll be something else that they're focused on.
I think it was in the first quarter, Melksham took a mark sort of on 50 or just outside of 50, and we went back to sort of have a shot for goal and they just called play on.
Yeah,
move it on. Like, you got to ask him, are you having a shot for goal?
I think all of those were just a complete mistake by the umpires. They're not allowing the player to actually go back behind the mark after they've taken a mark, and they're assuming that because they're not on their mark that they have to play on. The Petrarca one was particularly like that. He'd taken the mark, had turned backwards, and was actually going back to his mark when they called play on. It was incomprehensible, completely wrong call, I think.
And it was completely befuddled him as well. He wasn't sure what was going on.
Yeah.
I also think Max was treated quite unfairly in some of the rucking contests, and I understand that players hold each other, but he seemed to be getting called on it more.
And yet again got clobbered around the head and got no free kick. Yeah. He went down. He was down for a while, actually.
And then there's Oliver almost in every ball-up contest is being held and scragged. And then the one time that he sort of just lays any hand near anyone, he gets a free kick against him. Anyway.
Enough about umpires. All we need is not to have Matthew Nichols umpiring our game this week. We don't want him.
The bald bloke?
That's him.
Yep.
Normally it's free kick Hawthorn.
All right. Well, anything else from this game before we look at the Sydney game?
No. Bank the 4 points, move on. It's a really good win. I'm not being facetious. I think that's a really important 4 points, and we'll get a lot out of the fact that those young players are the ones who led the second half revival.
Well, let's talk about the Swans game. Quick changes, George. Ins and outs.
Changes for us or the changes for them?
I don't know.
I think we've identified our preferences. I think Sparrow and Petty are the ones that would come in naturally. Like I said, they're the right people for me. I don't know what we do about Fritsch, though. That's the question. Whether we just leave it as is on the interchange bench, and probably Jones another game under his belt this week to bolster the bench. But I think that's going to be the difficult one. What's done up forward?
Yeah.
Big man, before you go, big man, just with Jones being the medical sub, or what are your thoughts on the you're banking the game? If he plays medical sub, and there's going to be games where you don't get on it. Well, actually, it seems like all the medical subs are getting on these days, but if not, in terms of the games record for the Ds, how does that stack up? Is that an asterisk?
No, well, not if they count it as a game. They don't have. No, I think if they count it as a game, I don't. That's why my point before is that they should say 23rd man and count it as a game. It's either a game or it's not. Back in the day, I don't know what they used to do. Was before my time, but when they didn't have interchange, where they had reserve bench, did they count those games?
George, that's your closer to you than me.
I don't know. I really don't know exactly. No, because sometimes the 19th and 20th man didn't get to come on the ground.
But did they get the game counted towards their tally?
I don't know.
We need Super Mikado out there. We'll need. So look, if they're going to count it, then it should be 23rd man, and I think it's a specialised position, given we've not had to bring our sub in very often this year. In fact, only twice. Am I right in thinking? But
yeah, a lot of other clubs though.
Across the board, I think it's 50 or 60%. So I think he, as I said before, he makes a really good sub. So in terms of changes for me, Petty in, as I said before, and number 32 in. I think that will successfully appeal Fritter's suspension for a week, and he'll play.
Big call. How do you see I haven't got any notes on this game. I'm fading fast, but how do you see the game going, Big Man?
Just briefly, I think it sets up for an exciting game of footy. Their whole game plan's around moving it quick, so the corollary of that is for us to stop that movement, and the way to do it, I think I'll play the word pressure bingo tonight. But if we bring our pressure, we'll break it down. And I made the point at the top of the show. The fascinating thing about the Bulldogs-Tigers game was that I was really curious to see how the Dogs' handball style would deal with the pressure that the Tigers would bring. And I'm super pleased that the Tigers brought that, because I think that's their weakness. Is their model. The Bulldogs' model is so built around those short little half throws, half handballs that they can do that 5, 6, 7 times in 30 seconds to work their way through traffic. And when it works, it's brilliant. And it's really hard to stop, as it was in the first half. But when the pressure came up, their system fell apart, and they did exactly what Richmond want every team to do, and we refused to allow ourselves to do, which is the dump kick into their defensive unit. And it was, instead of Floston, who is a big out for them, it was what's his name? The big Richmond defender whose name is
Bolter.
Sorry.
Bolter,
yeah. Bolter just kept on taking mark after mark, and it was like, that's exactly that frustration that, we often felt. It's like, well, why are we just kicking into the opposition? Yeah, it's exactly right, George Bolter. And their whole game plan collapsed and just completely played into the Tigers' hands, and that notion of getting the game on their terms. That's exactly what Richmond did by turning up the pressure. And the why that's relevant for this week is that the Swans aren't as reliant on small handballs. Note that's a really unique way that the Dogs play. Super difficult to pull off. I would have thought you'd need really highly skilled players and a whole bunch of really highly skilled kicks who could, take their way through traffic and hit targets. But what the Swans do rely on is those sorts of high risk kicks into the corridor and on the angle and running fast. So the way to stop that is pressure. If we don't bring the right level of pressure, I would be surprised if we win the game. If we bring the pressure, I think, and without offensive structure that we've talked about a lot, they're going to find it hard to score against us like every other team. But it all comes back to that contest. And if we can do that, we'll win. If we don't, I think they will. So I think it sets up to be a really exciting game. I like those games where you've got two distinct styles, head to head, and that's what this will be.
The other thing the Swans bring to the game is they start really hard. They once they get their nose in front, they try to defend a lead rather than extend it. They tried it unsuccessfully against GWS, but GWS was always going to beat them because the Swans had simply stopped. But it was because they got off to such a good start that Longmire's got these really strong defensive structures and shut it down type of play, which suits the SCG particularly well. But you don't want to give them, a 2, 3, 4 goal start because they just won't let you back into the game. So it's important that we start well this week. I don't think Rampy's back, so they're going to have horrible problems with Ben Brown. Franklin's still very doubtful, although I think Franklin's a shadow of what he used to be. Their real scoring power is from their smalls up forward. Papley's. I'm not quite sure who we're going to be able to play on Papley. I think Hibbert might get the job, but Papley's very mobile, so it'll be interesting to see that contest.
I think Hibbert's an absolute natural for Papley, particularly coming off the job he did on Martin. Papley's, he's exactly the sort of player that's our Achilles heel. And without Jets, since Jets has lost his speed, Lockhart's maybe the heir apparent in that role, but he's obviously not up and going. Hibbert's really the obvious one for him. And the thing about Papley is that you give him 1 or 2 goals, he's a terrific player, but he doesn't get enough of the footy. So if you can keep him to 1 or 2 goals, then his impact outside of that is going to be limited. It's when he gets off the chain that's when he's really dangerous. So, if he gets 2 goals and 12 possessions, it's job done. So I think they'll put Hibbert on him. But they've got some super talented young players which I hope will come out and physically smash. So I think that if we bring our heat, I think we'll blow them off the park, actually. I think we're a bigger chance of winning this game by 7, 8 goals than we were last week. If we get on top and we, if we do knock them about, take our chances, this is a game we are a good chance of kicking away in.
Andy, your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are that they need to bottle Bimman's positivity and sell it at the Demon Shop because I need some of that. You guys will be familiar with the embarrassing records thread that's been going on Demonland for quite a long time. We've been slowly ticking off a lot of these embarrassing records over the last few years. One glaring one that we've got at the moment is Sydney at the G. We haven't beaten them there since 2010. I believe that was when we did thump them, and I'd love to have a repeat of that one. We drew with them in 2011. I think that was in a round 1 game, and we've lost 7 straight at the G to them. So we need to take back the MCG against Sydney. So,
good Lord, how do you know all of that? That's
Well, I was stealing that information from the thread that I just mentioned a few minutes ago. Uranus, that was his contribution.
And my horrible memory of Sydney is I think they'd lost 22 games in a row when they came to the MCG one year. I can't remember what year it was, and we managed to lose to them.
That thrashing that you mentioned where we beat them up, was that Roos. No, that was Roos was coaching Sydney, wasn't he? And we really did a number on him, and he was talking about that we were going to be premiership contenders, and on that sort of discussion we had last week about whether we're the real deal or not. We might have been a real deal for 1 week in Roosie's mind, and maybe they got him to the club, but 11 years later, we're not quite there yet.
Been a lot of false dawns.
It's been a lot of not real deals, but yeah, we did do a job on them that day.
All right, I think we're going to leave it there this week. Thank you, George. Thank you, Binman.
Andy, just one more thing before we finish.
Oh, yes.
We were talking about
yes.
So speaking of that sort of conversation on Real Deal, there was a thread on Demonland during the week about the podcast, and thanks for the feedback on that. I opened that thread up with a bit of trepidations. But there was a talk about the sort of tactical discussion and game plan, and we thought that it would be a great one to open up for around the bye, in the bye week, to have a review of the season up until that point, and have a focus on the game plan, some sort of key tactics and statistics, and invite people to sort of have that discussion who are, there's some terrific posters on Demonland who really drill down, and Axis of Bob, Titan Uranus, there's AF, there's It's Time, Growl, there's a number of Dazzle, there's a Dazzler, there's some really good posters who have got some really good insight into the footy, so we thought we might do a bit of a deep dive into what our game plan is, what the identifiable Melbourne brand actually is, and see if we can pull that apart a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm going to open it up to those guys, see if they want to come on and talk about it. But if you are a listener of the show, if you're not on Demonland, get on Demonland and maybe PM me, or if you found the show through other means, through Facebook or somewhere else, hit us up there if you want to join in on that conversation. Otherwise, you can listen to us talk about it. We'll do it in the week of the bye, mid-season review. We'll do that definitely, and looking forward to it.
And if you're not a regular poster to Demonland, there's a thread that pops up, a game plan, tactics, and all that jazz thread that has some really good discussion about sort of that element of the game strategy, and also lots of good links to articles. And there's increasingly some interesting stuff on radio and podcast, and that drills down into some of that part of the game.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, boys. Thank you, B-Man. Thank you, George. And thank you, Garbo, for calling in. And we'll be back next week, hopefully talking about a sensational win, a top 4 blockbuster. Hopefully it'll be a great game. All right. Go D's.
Go Redlegs.
Football machine to take us to the top.